It's Good morning. Woo! Yes. Thank you, John Rush. Oh, he's gone already. Thank you, Rick.
You know how they are.
Welcome, everyone, to The Point, our Humanist Hour, where no matter what you believe or don't believe or where you come from, you are welcome here and you are loved. We have a wonderful service for you this morning. I'm so happy to be back from the West Coast for about a month. It's great to see people in person, to get all these warm, loving hugs. This is quite a family here we have at All Souls. Gosh, some people are double dipping this morning. They were at the 10 o'clock service and they're here again for the 11:30 service. There was a lot to take in, so you really are in for a treat. What else do I need to say? Why don't we join together in saying the words of our covenant, which start with the word love. Ready? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. It's my joy and honor to welcome you to All Souls, where we love beyond belief. There's a lot in those three words, and you're going to hear something about that today. And I'm so happy that Leanna Fish is here with us this morning to light our chalice. As she comes forward, I have just a few words to share on what is today? Today is the 22nd. Today is the day. It is Sunday, yes, the date. I was looking for the date, not the day. Thank you. Today is the day that many of us would like, we are marking in one way or another the 50th anniversary of the passing of the Roe versus Wade decision, which 50 years ago recognized a fundamental right to abortion care in the United States of America. So for over the last 6 months, since the Dobbs decision, we've been living in a country in which a person's right to abortion is no longer a constitutionally protected right. Many of us have mourned the overturn of Roe. Some of us have protested, some of us have prayed, and some of us have organized. So I want to say thank you to Leanna Fish this morning for stepping forward as a leader in this congregation and calling us together here at All Souls to do the sacred work of honoring the complexity of human life. So as Leanna lights our chalice, we light this flame with respect for the differences among us and awareness of our interdependence. May this light guide us as we dedicate ourselves to finding a way forward together. I am not Shannon Boston, and yet I am here to tell you the story for all ages this morning called Mira and the Big Story by Laura Alari, illustrated by Sue Todd. Today's story is about a girl named Mira who grew up hearing marvelous stories about how her people were given their land by the mighty King of Heaven, who had taken pity on her homeless ancestors and sent an enormous bird to gather rocks and pile them into mountains, clawing the channel that filled with rainwater and became the river on whose banks the people lived. But across the river, a different story was told. There, the villagers believed that the Queen of Earth had sent giant turtles to carry her favorite people to this place, and it was her gift to them. Day after day, month after month, year after year, the people on both sides of the river looked at each other with distrust and suspicion. Mira was raised to believe that the others were enemies, and that the river valley belonged to her people, and that the other people did not belong. But Mira was very curious about the others, and she would watch, finding narrow places in the river where she could get close, and she noticed how similar those people were to her people, how kind they were to one another, and the stories about them being different just didn't make sense to her. So she took her questions to the wisest person in her village. Old Alfred was his name, and she told Alfred about her secret trips to the river and all that she had noticed, and Alfred asked, "So, what is your big question, Mira?" And in a small voice, Mira said, "Are our stories wrong?" Alfred took a deep breath, and then he said, "Let me tell you something about stories. Stories can make you bigger, not on the outside, of course, but on the inside. They can stretch your mind and stretch your heart, but a story can make you smaller on the inside if it takes up all the space in your mind and your heart. When new people or new ideas come along and there's no room for them, you must ask yourself, is my story making me bigger or smaller? Our village is dear to me, Mira, but our minds and hearts need to be stretched so we can make room for others." Mira started feeling very, very confused. What kind of story could be big enough for everybody? "I do have a story," replied Alfred. "Would you like to hear it?" he asked. Mira agreed, and old Alfred began. "In the beginning, there was nothing. And yet, there was everything. Imagine holding a seed in the palm of your hand. Now imagine something even smaller than that, containing everything that exists. It was there, but it was not there. Now imagine a light. This light was pure energy, and out of it came unimaginable tiny bits of matter that came together and formed stars, and over ages and ages the stars burned, and when it was time for them to die, they exploded, and all the stuff inside of them scattered into space like dandelion fluff on the wind, ready to start something new. From that stardust came everything: clouds and comets, whales and wildebeests, rattlesnakes and redwoods, dinosaurs and dragonflies. From that stardust came galaxies and solar systems and a little blue planet called Earth, and a valley, and a river, and 2 villages, and an old man named Alfred, and a little girl named Mira. We all come from the same place, and we are all made of the same stuff." Mira felt like her mind and her heart were so full they would burst. "If this story is true," she cried, "then no one owns the valley, and we all belong here. If this story is true, the people across the river are not others. They are like me. If this story is true, we're all connected to each other and to everything else: the river, the trees, the sky, the oceans, the animals. If this story is true, we've wasted too much time being enemies." And Mira began to cry. Old Alfred said gently, Mira, tell me, what is in your heart now? What about our stories? What about the bird who led us to the valley and the King of Heaven?" "Oh, Mira," answered old Alfred, "you asked me a big question. Now I have some big questions for you. Who dreamed everything when there was nothing? Who lit the first stars? Who made you so wonderfully curious? Mira, you have not lost your gift or the one who gave it. Both are just so much greater than you ever dreamed. So what do you, Mira, think of the story?" Alfred asked. "What does it do to you?" Mira took a deep breath. and realized that she felt bigger inside. I like your story, she told old Alfred with a moonlit smile. I think it's a story big enough for everyone. Here ends our story for all ages.
I'd like to invite us to just take a moment of silence together, just to take in, even though it's a children's story, it was pretty deep, I think, and I want us to just sort of really take in this idea that this all began through some mysterious process of stardust, and eventually all this life came into being. So let us take a moment just to sit in the awe of the breath of life and of being alive. And if there's anything else on your heart this morning, please hold that in the silence.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery.
So are our stories wrong? That's the question that the little girl asked the elder in her community at the beginning of the story we had for our children this morning. Are our stories wrong? And the elder said, stories can make you bigger, not on the outside, but on the inside. They can stretch your mind, they can stretch your heart, but also stories can make you smaller if they take up too much space in your heart and in your mind. So I want to say to all religious fundamentalists that, whether they're Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, you name it, anyone who thinks that their ancient stories their religious stories are literally true, it's not your story necessarily that's too small. It's your interpretation of the story. Now, how do I know? Because because any religion that teaches their story literally and says that all others are false is creating division and harm and making the world less safe. So I know because religious stories are not meant to create division and harm and to make the world less safe. That's how I know that the interpretation, at least, is off. So 2 weeks ago, if you were here, you heard I delivered a message about evolution and an evolutionary mindset and worldview that can help us to understand how we came here from a scientific perspective. And I looked from within that understanding of how this world unfolded, whether it gives us clues as to what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be treating each other and the planet and the animals and all life. And I talked about how that evolutionary mindset is really important in this time because it teaches cooperation as a key fundamental idea. As evolution, it's a story of greater and greater cooperation and complexity over time, greater cooperation and complexity that created life and evolved life on this planet. So we can learn from that. But then there are the religious creation stories. And the question is, what do we do with that? And the idea is that when we finally understand that there is an overarching scientific, real story about how we got here, then all of the creation stories and cultural myths and all of that stuff can then be something we can celebrate together and learn from one another and appreciate, because they don't have to carry the weight of being literally how we got here. And therefore, if one culture story is different from another culture story, they don't have to fight. They don't have to denigrate each other. They don't have to prove that one is true and the other is not. They don't have to call someone heretics and unbelievers and heathens and all the stuff that we hear here in Oklahoma and elsewhere. We can actually celebrate each other's stories, each other's religions, each other's cultures, if we can finally understand that there's an evolutionary mindset and way of looking at the world and worldview. Now, it's important, I think, for us to have this at the center right now of our conversation, because we are at the end of an era. A worldview is ending. There's a lot of resistance to it. Not everybody's happy. That the way that we've been looking at the world, our place in it, in relationship to the planet, its resources, one another, it's changing. It doesn't work anymore. It's ending. And when that happens, it's really important that we have a way of recreating a worldview that's more sustainable, that's more real, that truly can lead us forward. And so this morning, I want to talk about the mythic mindset. So we talked about evolution and a scientific mindset and how helpful that is. Now I want to talk about a mythic or mythological understanding of the world so that we can understand how to unlock the power of these stories. Once you take them away from being literal, they become incredibly, what we call polyvalent, full of meaning and possibility. So creation myths don't explain how we got here, but they do explain what we're supposed to be doing in this time. They can help us to figure that out and how we can co-create and recreate the world, especially in times of darkness and disintegration like we're in right now. Now, a very common archetypal story of this, they're called earth diver stories. You see them in cultures all over the world, and you see them in a lot of the Native American tribes here in North America. One of them is called the Sky Woman story. Many people have become familiar with the Potawatomi version of this story because of the fantastic best-selling book, Braiding Sweetgrass. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Author Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's from Oklahoma, Potawatomi. Beautiful story that tells the native history right alongside the scientific story of nature, and it's just beautiful how she's put that together. So the story, Sky Woman, I want to tell it to you this morning. I'm going to tell you a version of the story, because there's no story, you don't know the original. There's no like, oh, that's the real version. It's every story's a version of a story. So in this one, it begins where there's nothing except an endless expanse of water. And then there's this split in the sky, and out of that split falls a woman. And as she's falling, two geese see her as they're flying by. And they make a nest with their wings, and they catch her. And now that they're bringing her gently toward the water that she was falling towards, while holding her in this nest of feathers. And they call to see if there are any other creatures around who can help. And they hear from the great turtle, a great turtle that says, I'm here. And so the geese bring the woman to rest on the back of a turtle. Some people say that's why many native tribes call this Turtle Island. And now the woman is on the back of the turtle. And it's the turtle's responsibility to hold her up above this endless expanse of water. But it's not much of a surface upon which to hold her. And so the turtle asks if there are any other animals around who know any kind of substance, any kind of earth or something that could expand the base around which the woman is on, so that the woman from the sky can live and dwell. And when there was no answer from any of the animals, the woman herself said, I think if someone can dive down to the bottom of this great ocean, they might find some earth down there. And with those words, many animals appeared, birds and diving animals. And they all began to dive into the depths of the eternal dark waters. And the frog went down, and the muskrat went down, and birds went down. Some came up exhausted and without any earth. Others of them did not come back at all. And finally, the toad went down. And the toad was down for a long time. And when it came back, it too was exhausted. But then it floated near the turtle. And the turtle saw that in the mouth of the toad, there was a ball of mud. And the turtle reached in, and it brought it out, and it handed it to the woman who had fallen from the sky. And she took that mud that had been brought from the depths of the very darkest part of the ocean. And she began to spread it around the rim of the shell of the turtle. And as she was handling it, and as she shaped it around the rim, it began to grow. And as it began to grow, she began to spread it out. And that became the earth. That became the place that we now know as home. And that became the place where all the beings that we now know live. Now the story goes on. But I'm going to end there for now, and I want to give you a moment to check in with yourself about what part of this story are you connecting with this morning. Do you connect with the woman as she's falling? Or as she's being caught and held up? Or when she's balancing precariously on the back of the turtle? Or do you identify with the geese who see her and catch her? Or the toad or the turtle who asks for help? Or the diving creatures, the ones who come back exhausted or don't come back? Or the formless ocean? See, the thing about mythology and mythic stories is that they unlock things that are deep within us if we pay attention And so the way that you know is there's usually some piece of the story that kind of hits you different. Maybe you've heard the story 100 times, and you're like, wow, I never really noticed the thing about the thing, because all of a sudden that becomes alive to you. Or you go, yeah, I'm feeling for this one creature right now as I hear the story today. I don't know why, but pay attention. So I'm going to give you a second just to check in with yourself. Is there some part of this story as you heard it that sort of caught you? Like a toad, a muskrat, for you? What came alive or stuck in your mind? So there are two mistakes that people make when it comes to these kinds of stories. The first one is that they accept them literally, as if like that's how the world was created by the frog and the turtle and all of this. And people believe this about the Adam and Eve story in the Garden of Eden from the Bible. They believe it literally. It's what happened, and if you contest it, if you don't say that or your scripture says something else, then you're wrong, you're a heathen, you're this, you're that. And that's just not the way to access the beauty and power of these stories. But the second mistake is when we decide, because it's not literally true, that we decide it has no value and we don't think we need to pay attention to it. We might think it's silly, no more important than a Saturday morning cartoon. But myths are storehouses of wisdom. And when we listen openly to these stories, they unlock creativity and wisdom that's deep within us, in our psyche, if you will. Our psyche is like a vast ocean. Below the surface of our everyday thoughts, there is a lot going on. Right? I see some therapists out there. You know what I'm talking about. If we don't take the time to dive and explore it, or we don't have the equipment or the skill, or no one told us it's there, then we can remain right on the surface of our life the whole time. But when we learn to dive to the depths of our being, we discover immense knowledge and wisdom and creativity and compassion. Now, stories like this help us to surface some of the mystery and the meaning that dwells below the surface of our everyday mindset. Mythologist Michael Meade, he does a great job of describing some of the meanings that can be found through this story of Sky Woman that I just told. For one thing, the idea that descent leads to renewal. Sometimes when we feel like we're falling in our lives, we're not always aware that this is an opportunity for renewal because we're too busy falling apart. We don't realize we're in a mythic moment in our lives that could change things for the better. He points out how the animals cooperate with each other, and it's through this cooperation that they create and sustain the world. It teaches us that to value the web of life and all that we're a part of that web of life that makes the world happen. And it shows us that it's not some hero that comes down and saves the world, but it's common beings working together with respect for one another, valuing each other. And it's a reminder of the importance of the feminine. Many of these stories have the main character is feminine. And that's an important piece. The idea of the womb of creation, if you will, is often expressed understandably in feminine terms. So it's interesting how this story shows us that it's when that which is the highest and that which comes from the lowest come together. That's how the world's potential comes into being. You see, a lot of times we talk about bringing those who are marginalized in our society into the center of the conversation, finding ways to connect, finding ways to value those who are at the lowest. You even hear, in the Bible, there's that thing about Jesus says, We do unto the least of these in society, you've done unto me. There's this idea of those who are down and low, bringing them up. It's not just to be do-gooders or to do good, which is nice, but it's about something much deeper, this idea that it really takes connecting those at the bottom and the top together for the world and humanity and all of life to reach its greatest potential. So a big idea in this is that in dark and difficult times in our lives, that we must become earth divers ourselves. Something in our depths is needed in the conscious world right now. Like the ball of mud in the frog's mouth, we have access to the unconscious, which is filled with wisdom and potential and possibility. And each of us is able to bring something forth, up and out of us, that is needed in the world, especially in a time like this. For all of us who are alive at this time, as the worldview is changing, people are trying to figure out what end is up, and a lot of people are resisting, even with violence. All of us who are alive at this time, things are trying to emerge through us, but we have to pay attention. Each of us is a vehicle through which the substance of life can come into being. And we add to creation, and we participate in creation. We do it when we plant a garden. We do it when we write stories. We do it when we take words and notes and make a song. We do it when we mold a hunk of clay. We do it when we create opportunities for conversations that need to happen. We are engaging in creation. The earth or the universe can create wheat, but we need to bake a cake. We're needed to bake a cake. We co-create. We have a role to play. And a small change made by us can sometimes have a huge impact. So if you connected to the story this morning as I was telling it and you found some connection, you may have connected with the creature who asked for help. Maybe it's because you need to ask for help right now in your life. The story reminds us that we all need to ask for help sometimes. Even a sky woman. Asking for help is part of how the world reaches its potential and how we reach our potential. You may have connected with the animals who come to help. The story might remind you that helping others and making sacrifices also help the world to reach its potential. Now, you can't really say that there's a right or a wrong way to interpret a myth exactly. Although I do think that one of the ways that we can judge whether it is a right or wrong interpretation is, does it make us bigger? Does it make our world safer? Does it draw out something that is making a positive difference, or does it create division? Those are some of the ways we can judge. But in general, there's not like a right or a wrong way necessarily to interpret it. But the myths are a key that unlock the subconscious, which is a vast ocean of wisdom and possibility inside all of us. Now, I want to be clear that this is the end of an era. That's a pretty big deal. And we have come to the end of some major worldviews about how people see other people, sexuality, gender. There's a lot on the table right now. Worldviews that have shaped this society. And there are a lot of people resisting these changes. So it's a time when we are called to go into the depths of who we are and what we're made of. And I believe in this new era, the feminine is going to play a really important role. Central role. And we're all going to need to learn a new appreciation for darkness and learn to be divers, plumbing the depths of our own lives? Michael Meade says that when you find yourself falling, you might as well dive. When we're going through hardship and difficulty, it's time to follow that energy down into the depths of our being, which is a storehouse of wisdom. We are all being called to bring forth something from within us and to contribute to the world. That's what it means to play our role in creation, to co-create. This ongoing and amazing story that we're in. Now, I don't have time to go too far into it, but I want to mention something because I think it's important. I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on the fact that the Bible is filled with many of these mythic kinds of stories, if you understand them as such. I say this because the Western Christian dominant, literalistic, chauvinistic, anthropomorphic interpretation of the Bible that most of us know is partially responsible for a great deal of environmental destruction since the beginning of the industrial age. Lynn White Jr. explains that Christians in the modern West have interpreted the Bible to say that God is separate from nature, which is dualism, that humans are the only figures in creation made in the image of God, which is anthropocentrism, and that creation exists ultimately for human sake, which is human chauvinism. These perspectives have led to a great deal of indifference and even hostility towards nature and the natural world. One of the reasons we have to let go of these old worldviews, and I don't mean the stories per se, I mean the interpretation of the stories. And that's why we need to learn an evolutionary mindset and also a mythic perspective. Because with this individualistic, literalistic, dualistic, chauvinistic interpretations, we've been destroying the planet and the animals. And we need to discover a new worldview that honors nature and our place in it. Now, if we interpret Genesis, the first book of the Bible, for those who don't know, from a mythic perspective, you find that it has a lot in common with the Sky Woman story, really. I'm not talking about the interpretation that we often hear, but look at the story. In Genesis, a deity comes down from the sky and forms humans and other animals out of the mud and the soil and breathes life into them. This is an ancient Jewish tribal deity in Genesis. And in the story, he, like Sky Woman, has dirt under his fingernails. Like Sky Woman, he descends down and enters creation and becomes a part of it so that he can form it into life. And then he gives the freedom and the responsibility to us to keep creating. Are these stories wrong? You decide. I want to just make a few announcements because there's so much happening, and let's see. I've been teaching a foundations class at 11:30 this time. I'll be teaching next Sunday at this time. I'll be teaching a foundations class here in the building on humanism. So if you're interested in humanism, its history, how it became a part of All Souls, and how it became a part of Unitarian Universalist, the tradition in which this church is a part of, that I'll be going through that at 11:30 in a class. So if you want to come and hear the message, I think Randy is delivering the message, and you can come at 10 if you want, and then come to my class, or come here and forget my class. But I just want you to know I'll be teaching a class on humanism. There's a reproductive justice table. Barbara talked a lot about what's happening with the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. If you're interested in that, want to be a part of that, you can find out more in the foyer. We have our bookstore out here and some coffee and refreshments and donuts after the service is over. I hope you'll stay for that. I want to thank those who came. We're doing a visioning process as a congregation to think about what do we want to do in the next 5-10 years? What do we want to be? How do we want to welcome each other and new people into this community? What kind of difference do we want to make in each other's lives and the society? So I hope you can be a part of that. There's some things listed in your order of service and online. I think we have one Monday night. We have some other ones coming up and some online opportunities that we're going to be announcing. Our Wednesday Connections dinner and programming is going to start February 1st, Wednesday night. So come on out. There's dinner in here, a chance to take some classes and do other things. Really fun, a great way to meet people. And so there's a lot happening. I don't know is Nefertiti Sanders, is she in here? If you see Nefertiti, beautiful African-American woman who's often out here on Sunday mornings, out in the foyer and helping us with everything. She's been here 10 years. It's her 10-year anniversary last week, so tell her happy anniversary and that we're glad that she's here because she's such a special part of our community. Today, we're going to take up an offering. We always give away the offering to those in need, and we're going to give our offering today to the Reproductive Rights and Freedom Symposium, which is coming up in March. There's so much going on right now on that issue, and this is going to help us to support some really important work that they're doing on raising the question and creating conversations about individual rights, bodily autonomy, the broad implications of gender equality and the well-being of our community, privacy, health care, tribal sovereignty, and free speech. What more could we want, right? So please give generously as we now receive this morning's offering. Wow, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Rick Forder and
John Rush.
John Rush. Let's hear it for John Rush. Thank you for being with us. When you think to yourself for a second that we all came from an explosion of stars 14 billion years ago, and it's been forming and reforming in cells and dinosaurs and all this stuff into the earth, out of the earth, into the sky, all this has been happening all the way down to a place where we can create music, flutes and pianos, and it's incredible. And then you guys interpret that song so beautifully. And that's what we do. We're creative beings. And so I hope that in this time of difficulty and struggle and change that's happening, and where there's negativity and division and so much going on in our world, that we here at All Souls, that you and I and all of us, in whatever ways we can, will bring forth something creative, something positive, something beautiful that the world needs. Because it needs people who are cheering it on right now, cheering on creation, cheering on the survival of the animals and one another. So go out into this week charged up to do the work of co-creation wherever you go. And until we meet again, thank you.